Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Reds Rundown podcast, hosted by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob. He's Joe. And we thank you for taking the time to join us today. Joe, how was your weekend? As we always like to start it off with.
Well, all my teams lose, but that's par for the course as we've gone through this whole season with the Reds. So, Bucky Wildcats football lost a close one to Georgia. The Bengals lose a close one to the Chiefs. They both lose by 1 point.
Yeah.
This isn't our year. This isn't our year. Next year might be our year. 2025, which includes maybe a Bengals Super Bowl, might be our year. But 2025 might be it. We'll save it for that.
Yeah, a little bit of a different tone from Joe this week. The Bengals did barely lose to the Chiefs, for any of you Reds fans out there who care about that. Probably should have won the game, to be honest with you. A lot of people are saying the Bengals outplayed the Chiefs. I tend to agree, but hey, at the end of the day, it's all about who wins and who loses. So, which the Reds did a little bit of winning, a little bit of losing this week, Joe. But before that, we'll head into the question of the day, which I think will be the bulk of our discussion in this episode, Joe. Would you make front office changes? We will dive into that a little bit later, but let us know in the comments below if you guys would make any changes to the front office and what they might be, even if you're feeling so bold. But we move on here. Joe, it was an okay week for our Redlegs. They started off, they had 3 teams they played this week. First time I can really remember that happening in a very long time. With the way the schedule is nowadays, it's, pretty much 3 games and 3 games and 3 games and 4 games, so it's just about impossible to get that in. But we had a makeup game from a rainout against the Braves, and Nick Martinez went out and threw an absolute gem. 7 innings, 2 hits, 5 strikeouts. The big RBI coming from Ty France, his 22nd double. But the Reds would go on to win 1-0, as the bullpen would hold it down as well. Fernando Cruz and Alexis Diaz both getting the job done, and the Reds would sweep the 1-game series against the Braves. Move on. Head into St. Louis, and the Reds would win their 3rd game in 3 different cities after a win against the Mets, Braves, and now the Cardinals. They would win 3-0. Another great outing from Rhett Lauder, who is looking very real, Joe. Very real to me. 5 hits, 3 strikeouts. Lowered his ERA to a 5.9. And the rest of the bullpen got the job done. Some big hits from Jake Fraley, Ty France with another one, and Friedel with 2 of the 3 RBIs. And the Reds would go on to win 3-0. The Reds would then lose a bummer 2-1 with Buck Farmer giving up a run in the 8th. Reds bats really not going super well, at least, in St. Louis this week. Steer would have a big double, but that would really be about it. Ellie De La Cruz with 3 strikeouts. He is nearing the all-time Reds record and will very, very much surpass that, set by Drew Stubbs. If you think that Ellie, though, is Drew Stubbs-like, you are crazy. Drew Stubbs was, I think, a better player than most Reds fans would like to remember, but I do have the belief in me, Joe, that Ellie will cut down those strikeouts next year, I think, at a pretty decent rate. So we'll have to see. But the Reds would go on to lose 6-1. Sonny Gray, great start against the Reds, his former club. Jacob Junis with an awesome start as well. But unfortunately, Carson Spires, you can tell, is definitely near the end of his rope in terms of his fatigue is massive right now. Again, the Reds would really not be able to do much offensively in St. Louis. They would drop 2 of 3. But then they would head into Minnesota, Joe. And against a battling for first place team, a team that's likely going to be in the playoffs, the Reds just hit the crap out of them. Julian Aguiar with an awesome start. 6 and a third innings. 3 runs given up, 4 strikeouts. This kid is coming on and playing much better than I think anybody expected him to. TJ Friedel with a big home run. Ellie De La Cruz with his first ever grand slam. That ball was scorched, by the way. And Friedel would go on to have 3 more hits. France with another hit and an RBI. The Reds would win 8-4. Then the Bats would continue to stay alive on Saturday with 11 runs, a 9-run 4th inning for the Redlegs. Friedel with another big game, 4 hits, in this game as well, including another home run, and Jake Fraley with a big home run as well. Nick Martinez would go on and pitch another outstanding outing, 6 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts. Nick Martinez may, outside of Hunter Green, be the best pitcher this year in the Reds on the Red staff, and it'll be interesting to see, as we talked about last week, what he will do heading into next year. Sunday game, not as great. The Reds were up 2-1. Rhett Lauder with an awesome start, but ultimately would end up giving up a few more in the 6th, as Tony Santillan would unfortunately let the game get blown open, along with Justin Wilson and Casey Legumina. The Reds would get a couple big hits, but it would ultimately not end up being enough. Ty France with another RBI on a sac fly in this game. The Reds would drop it 9-2. But ultimately, Joe, it was not a bad weekend. They went 4-3 this week. They improved their record. They're still, I don't think they're technically mathematically eliminated yet, but they are very close to being so. I believe they'd have to win their last 11 games, I believe, to probably make the playoffs at this point. So their magic number is truly coming up here very soon. I would love it if they won 10-1 in their last few games here, Joe. I would end up getting my bet for the over on 82.5 wins, something that felt very, very sure-handed. And I think this Reds team, honestly, with the way the hitting has come along at the end of the season, if the big three pitching had been available throughout this month, Joe, I actually do think the Reds would have been making a run at this point, because they're actually playing some okay baseball, especially considering, people like Nick Martinez and Jacob Junis are stepping up, and Rhett Lauder even in such a crazy way. But like I said, it is about as over as it can be for our Redlegs at the moment. But Joe, what'd you see this week from them? Positives, negatives, all the above.
Yeah, just most of what we've seen all season. There's a couple games where you score 1 run. There's a couple game where you score 2 runs, and then there's games where you have 11 and 8 runs. And it's just the inconsistency that's going to kill you. And again, that comes from not having guys who've done that before, not having a veteran bat in the lineup. It's good to have those big games, and I do appreciate John Sadak keeping the energy up when Ellie gets his first career grand slam. It's not easy to have. We talk about players maybe checking out at this point of the year because imagine being a broadcaster having to do all these games. Like, yeah, you're paid to do it, but I really appreciate what John Sadak does for the Reds. But that inconsistency, I think, is what kills us, and that's why we talked about last week, Rob, like going out and getting some of these free agent bats to possibly help this lineup, and playing the people who I think are hitting the ball rather than the ones who are not, which seems pretty easy, but is not something the Reds did this year all the time. It's a good week. It doesn't matter in the end. I think the most important things was just Rhett Lauder keep on getting that experience. As we mentioned last week, I won't go into too much detail, but having him battle for a rotation spot or be in the back end of the rotation really bolsters this whole thing. And if they get a starting pitcher in free agency too, I mean, it makes it one of, if not the best rotations in baseball if they stay healthy, which is also the big key. So, yeah, not taking too much away from this week. It was a good week for the Reds, but I think like those type of things are still the things I'm looking at. It's not wins or losses at this point. It's just how is Lauder doing? Is anyone going to keep on hitting the ball? Is anyone going to take that third or first base job and make it theirs? Those things I think are still the same from the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, nothing major there. We were going to do big shout-outs, and I think we did them during this, but I remembered that I had something, Joe, that I wanted to talk to you about real quickly. Is it feels like the Reds have a lot of players that are in the solid tier. And what I mean by that is they've got a lot of guys who are solid, but none that are great or excellent, except for maybe Ellie right now, and then maybe Hunter Green. And it feels like this front office that we're going to talk about in a minute, they have a lot of big decisions to make this offseason in terms of figuring out how to take that step from being solid to great. Because I do think that injuries definitely derailed this team, especially with the way they've been playing through most of September. I do genuinely think that they were, we'll say, 5 games away probably from being in the hunt right now, and they would have been. They would be, I think, 3 games out if they had just won 5 more of those 1-run games, or had some pitching down the stretch. and they would be battling right now with the Braves and the Mets for that last wild card spot, and things would be a little bit more interesting going into these 11 games because a 3-game deficit with 11 games is, I mean, you can make it up in literally 2 games. So, which I know sounds wonky, but that's the way standings work, and especially a sport like baseball that has so many games. And so it is a bummer to see. But what do you think? How do you, in your mind, make the decision between taking the risk of losing some of your solid guys, or and trying to go for the home run type person, and not literally just somebody who can hit home runs, but like that person who has that potential excellence? Because what I'm seeing right now is, and when I talk about solid guys, I'm even talking about guys like Spencer Steer, right? Like, while he is having a great season in terms of RBIs, and he's been very unlucky still. Like, he has still one of the lowest batting averages on ball put in play. He's still hitting the ball well. His like batting indexes by Baseball Savant and everything are all very high. And he's got a chance still to drive in 100 runs this year. He's definitely gonna get to at least 90. He's one RBI away from that. But you have just a lot of guys, Joe, and I'll quickly name them, that are in the solid but maybe not excellent tier, right? You have Steer, who I think is starting to fall into that a little bit. TJ Friedel, Ty France, Santiago Espinal, Jake Fraley, even Jonathan India, right? Like, in this order, you have so many guys who I think are solid, big leaguers, but you need those, I think, next level type of guys. And I just don't know how do you make that decision, at least in your mind, as to who you get rid of? Like, who do you keep? Like, who do you believe in for the future? Do you only take the young guys? Do you take the guys, like you said, with Espinal and France? Both of those guys have, I think, been crucial to this September, I guess we'll call it a swoon here at the end. I just would love to know where your thoughts are with this team, Joe, in terms of the solid players and what they need to do to, I think, take that next step.
Yeah, I think it is good that we've identified guys who can have roles on the team, but outside of Ellie, it's pretty much all role players. You can make a case for Tyler Stevenson too, but he's even cooled off a little bit. And it's not like, we're debating whether he's a top 10 catcher. It's not like he is. It's very much up for debate. It's not like he's an elite player. So that's what I think the problem is. Like, they do have Ellie, and Ellie too, like, he's really tailored off too. Like, his WAR is only 4.6 right now, which ranks around 30th in the league, I think 27th or something. So you don't really have the biggest superstar of all superstars yet. Ellie's developed well this year, so we think he's going to take that next step next year, right? So that's not like something you have to really address. But he has no help on the team. It's fair to say, like anyone else on the team, there's no Batman to his Robin right now, or there's no Robin to his Batman. Sorry, and I do think that maybe shortstop is off limits. You don't look for anything else. If you want to make a case for Matt McClain to second base, go ahead. I think we need to see him play after all the injuries this year and see how he does. But those are your two guys you hope to be stars, and everyone else should be role players. But I think everyone else is like, your job is in jeopardy. And I don't mean that in a bad way of like, you know, hey, like TJ Friedel, you're definitely going to be sitting on the bench next year. I mean, hey, if there's a free agent center fielder that we can sign who's possibly a superstar, TJ Friedel, you're playing right field, buddy. Sorry, that's how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's how they need to address it. Like, it's cool that they have these solid players, and I'll give the front office credit for finding some of these guys. But you want to win in Major League Baseball and win big, not just make the playoffs. You have to go get free agents and to help support the young core that you have. We've seen teams do that in the past, like the young Astros all those years ago, whether they cheated or not. They went and got some free agents to kind of help their young core and the solid players they identified. So that is what I'm thinking. Like, hey, if you go sign a center fielder, I love TJ Friedel. I think he's been great for this team. And this year, I'm not really taking too much to heart. 233 batting average. I think he's going to boost that up next year if he's healthy. But, like, I'm not going to not sign someone because of him. Like, that's kind of my philosophy. So go out and sign the best, most consistent veteran bats you can. And if it means you have to shuffle around the lineup or shuffle around who's playing what position, we've already done that. So, like, the guys have experience playing different positions. So that's my take on it. I don't think you can sit here and let the roster stand pat. I think it's fair to expect guys like Spencer Steer to play better next year, maybe hit 250, get to 100 RBIs. That's still not quite good enough as maybe your second best hitter on a team to maybe win and big in the postseason. Maybe if Matt McClain comes back, that's awesome. But that's kind of what I'm thinking is, like, everyone's jobs in jeopardy, or at least their roles in jeopardy with this team. It might be, hey, if we get a good leadoff hitter, Friedel, you're moving down in the order, bud. It's something like that. It's just, to me, that's what I would say is like, don't let anyone besides Ellie stop you from signing anyone else at any other position. And that might go for pitchers too. Like, don't let the fact that Rhett Lauder's playing well right now stop you from signing another good starting pitcher. Because I want to win. Don't let if Alexis Diaz does go on a tear at the last 11 games, don't let that stop you from signing a closer, a back end bullpen reliever help. People will have to change roles, but the front office's job is to make sure it's talent acquisition. So they have a lot of okay pieces. They have about Ellie, maybe Matt McLean, and a couple of the starting pitchers, maybe who are really difference makers. And I think you're going to need more if you really want to win big in the postseason next year.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. The only one who I'm looking at here again, and I want to point it out, is I do want to give Spencer Steer a little bit of a shout out. To be honest with you, he is still hitting very well, and he still he's a low strikeout guy. He still makes a lot of contact. He's got good power. Joe, his batting average on ball put in play is a 266 this year. That's just very irregular, is what I will say. Especially for a hitter who his barrel rate is up, his velocity is down a little bit, but nothing of concern. But like his hard hit ball is up, his Ks are down, his walks are up. He's gonna probably end up with close to the same number of doubles, potentially similar number in terms of home runs, but he's gonna have way more RBIs. Again, I mean, he's actually had a very good season. He's got 10 more stolen bases than he did last year. Like, he's had a good season. I'm gonna bump him up past solid because I think he just had an unlucky season. Is what I'm gonna call it for right now. I will have to see the next year, but I think he's gonna be your 275 guy. I think he's gonna drive in more runs than we realize. I still think you have him, Matt McLean, and Spencer Steer, but they still have to go out and get other guys. So I'm not going to dispute what you're saying. I think the only one that I want to, at least when I'm looking at it, almost every stat other than the amount of hits are up, and the amount of times that this man had some absolute laser stolen from him because it's hit right at a third baseman or a left fielder or a right fielder. Like, I'm going to give him some credit and say that a couple of those fall in, and he's got closer to a 250, 260 batting average this year, which probably results close to 100 RBIs. And I think in the year when baseball has much lower batting averages, I think we can say safely that he's going to potentially be a very consistent guy. So I'll take that over what we've had. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they've got to go out and they've got to just address this. There's just no other way around it. They got to go find somebody else to be there with Ellie. And I think there are going to be some bats, Joe, that we'll look at during the offseason that I think can be those kinds of difference makers. There are some trade options too. I really wish they would have gone hard at Brent Rooker. I really do. I think he could have been a huge difference maker for this team. He has been hitting the absolute crap out of the ball all season. And this team could have still been in the hunt with a guy like that. I think he makes that much of a difference in this lineup. But unfortunately, we are where we are for right now. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But we'll move on here. Injury updates. Matt McLean is officially out for the season pretty much. They might try to sneak him in for like a game or two here at the very end just to get him in a bat or two, I guess. I don't really know. They said he's resumed hitting activities. I don't really see why you'd want to bring him back. The other ones, apparently, now Hunter Green threw to live hitters the other day. He's going to do so again, I believe, tomorrow. And then they anticipate him getting 2 more starts is what I had last seen. They're hoping Abbott will come back for a start and Lodolo will come back for a start. But I just got to ask Joe, does it even matter? Like at this point, like why does it matter whatsoever? I know that the lottery is kind of made things a little different. It's not going to really change what we do necessarily in terms of drafting. Like maybe we can get a little bit of a better draft spot. So you might as well play guys while you can. But do you really anticipate the big 3 coming back at all this season? Like, I think Hunter is going to come back, but why even risk it with Abbott or Lodolo at this point? Especially considering Lodolo's been on the IL like 10 times, it feels like. I know it's only 4, but it feels like literally every other month. Which actually, that would be. 4 times would be every other month.
Yeah, no, it means nothing at this point. I think the long-term health of these players is more important than getting them a couple at bats or starts here. I was laughing when you said that because I think I saw when it was released, that Matt McLean was cleared to swing this weekend. I think it was Friday or Saturday. David Bell said, "Yeah, he's probably out for the season." I'm like, what do you think? I mean, there's 11 games left. Like, how are you going to bring him back? So it means nothing if they do bring him back. That'd be an awful choice because if there is a setback and then he has to
Yeah.
go through rehab in the offseason, that sets things back for next year. There's no point. Sit everyone who's valuable out at this point who has any sort of minor condition, and then even at the end of the year, if like Ellie or any of the other guys kind of get like banged up, just don't even risk it. Just take them out.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I just don't see the point in it. If Hunter, like for his pride, wants to come back for 2 games, great. Didn't seem like his injury was like one that would linger or anything once they got it kind of figured out. So if he's throwing well and he wants to try to win 2 more games, like up his stats a little bit and everything, then great. Everybody else just keep him out. I mean, again, if he can re-injure it for some reason or if he's not 100%, then don't throw Hunter. But other than that, again, it would literally take this team winning, I believe, every single game for them to even potentially have a chance. And even there, I just don't think that's going to happen. I'll look one more time to make sure I'm not completely off my rocker here, Joe. But I believe that, yeah, I mean, the Braves and the Mets already have 11 or have 81 wins. So they would literally have to lose every game, and I think the Reds would have to win every game for them to make the playoffs. And that it's happened. It's very unlikely, but it has happened. I don't really know how that would work. I mean, I guess technically they would have to go 3-8, both of these teams, down the stretch, which again can't happen. Just doesn't seem likely. And the Reds would have to win 11 straight, which again can't happen. We've been waiting for a 10-game winning streak. If this Reds team somehow goes on an 11-game winning streak at the end of the season and makes the playoffs, then I think the whole city will lose their mind. But that's just very unlikely. Don't count on it. We'll move on. The last thing here is I'm going to read this article that came out, Joe. And let me pull it up here. And it was by Mark Sheldon of Reds.com. And it's Nick Kroll discussing 2025 and his exact quotes here. So he asked him about David Bell and his future, and he said, and Kroll said, I quote, "He's got a contract for next year. As of right now, we're going to evaluate everything at the end of the year and see what we have to do moving forward." Joe, that very much feels like, to me, optics talk, PR talk, whatever you want to call, of we're going to take a very serious look about getting rid of David Bell. Now, I don't know if Kroll is going to just try to use David Bell as a scapegoat and try to reset things. I don't know what level of confidence you have that they're actually going to do this. You and I are both on the David Bell's gotta go train. But at the same time, they've got to make sure that they find the right manager too. Because I don't want them to just get rid of him and then bring in somebody who isn't actually going to be beneficial. But at the same time, I don't want him here. So I don't really know where I'm at with this. How did you read these comments? Because I'm sure you saw it as well before now, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's kind of giving the fans what they want. Like, I don't know how interested they are in actually firing David Bell as much as maybe that's what we think is going to be the answer. It's kind of like, oh, we didn't make the playoffs. Of course we're going to review everything. Like, like
Yeah.
we want to get better. But they just signed him to that contract extension. I'm not sure they're willing to give up on him yet, and that's what pains me. And I think if they do end up firing him and hiring someone new, they're going to use that as an excuse to be like, well, we used money on the manager, so we can't go use money on free agents. And I don't want that to happen either. So that's kind of like the nebulous part of this is like it
Yeah.
is very gray area for everything. I would like to have a different manager. I don't think the manager matters as much anymore, especially now with the DH. And if we're going to hire guys who just stick to the analytics book, then let's put a book in the dugout and let that manage at this point. So that's that's kind of where I'm at with
But
it. So I don't know what this means. I don't know what's going to happen. I would say firing him, hiring a new manager, and putting money in free agency is ideal. But can we ever expect the Reds to go all in on anything? Not really. So
Cincinnati teams and going in on anything would be nice. Would certainly be nice. Yeah, I again, it feels like lip service for the most part. I do think that they are going to look at it at least. I don't know if they're going to do anything, but I do think they'll seriously look at it, and they may give him the, hey, this is the last year. figure it out or you're gone, right? Like that could be the conversation that they have. I would not hate that. I would be fine with that because that lights a fire under him and hopefully maybe he figures out a way to get it done. I just don't know that he's your manager that's going to help you win a World Series regardless is kind of the problem. Like I think he could potentially get this team to the playoffs next year, but is he going to win them a World Series? I genuinely don't know. I mean, I would say probably not, but we've barely gotten to even see him in the playoffs. Maybe he's one of those weird managers that just comes alive like a certain player does during the playoffs, and he just coaches his ass off, and we somehow find a way to win a World Series with a subpar team maybe compared to most people. But David Bell does insane managerial stuff, and we're like, oh my god, like this is crazy, right? Like I can't believe this, you know? Like maybe he's got a little Zach Taylor in him, right? Where he gets to the playoffs and the team's a little bit better than people would expect, right? Like finds a way to make a magical run or something like that and saves his job. I just don't see it. Like I will tell you right now, I think regardless of the moves that this team makes, I think with everybody healthy, I'm still going to pick them to make the playoffs next year, most likely. Depends on what moves the rest of the NL Central makes, but I really genuinely think that they are positioned well enough. They've got enough of a young core to where I think they can make a run as long as people stay healthy. Again, like, and I'm talking about like not losing 20 pitchers, it feels like, throughout the season and not losing, 6 of your young hitters and you're down to the point where, you're taking chances on, designated for assignment guys, right? Like that's what I'm talking about. And maybe even making a move at the trade deadline because they've actually played well enough. Like there are caveats to that, but I do think this team has the talent. It's just whether or not he can, get the best out of them. And whether or not, honestly, like this manager, this front office, who I think we should talk about as well, can do what they need to do. I don't dislike Nick Krall necessarily. I just really wonder how much of a leash he's actually being given right now and how much the Castellinis are just sitting there hoarding money or whatever the hell they're doing to keep him from actually being able to do his job correctly.
Yeah, with David Bell, the similarities to Zach Taylor are kind of there. They're very much player managers, player coaches, and that's good to an extent. But there's sometimes when you need to and David Bell does this with the umpires, where he yells and screams and stuff. There's sometimes you need to hold your players accountable.
Yep.
If you're not hitting for 2-3 games straight, throw a chair in the locker room like the old days. Get people rattled up a little bit and let everyone know that you can't just go up to the plate a million times in a row and strike out. You can't do what Will Benson did this year. Or I will. I like you as a person, but that's just you can't do that.
Yeah.
Your job is on the line. This is a competitive environment, and when you have such a lax thing of hey, I'm always going to have the players back. That's good. I would recommend that that's the way to start, but you can't let it get to a point where it has, and it gets to a point where with both coaches, Zach Taylor, David Bell, again, paired with Cincinnati, it just feels like they're kind of being yes men to the front office and the players themselves and kind of get pushed around a lot. And I don't like that they're put in those situations. I think Zach Taylor's made the most of it, but I would also argue he has Joe Burrow, and that might be what the number one thing for coaches and managers is having good players. He has Joe Burrow, one of the top players in sport. The Reds don't have that yet. Ellie could get there, sure, but they don't have that yet. So, I think maybe having someone who can kind of hold these players accountable and change the lineup when things aren't going well and do different things, use pitcher in different spots if they're not doing well instead of keeping them in the same spot every single time, whether it's Fernando Cruz trying to get more holds even though he has that ERA ballooning. That's what's frustrating to me is that I think at some point you can't just be a player's manager. You have to hold people accountable. So let's see if they make changes there. Front office wise, it is very tough to tell how many resources Nick Krall is being given, what he is being told, how much of a budget he has. I'll give him credit. He's found a couple good players. I would say right now with the way the season went, his young core of players doesn't rival those of the Braves or the Astros we talked about several years ago. We thought it was going to be an all-time young core. There's a couple good players, and then there's a couple guys way below that who are just average, who could develop into better players. We'll see. They're still young, but year 2 maybe didn't go very well for them, for the Reds, and that's something that I think we need to figure out. Now, I'm with you, Rob. I think if you don't want to get rid of Nick Krall, that's probably okay, but this is a firing David Bell is the last straw, right? Hey, David Bell's gone, you have a new manager. If it doesn't work after this, it's on you.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, I mean, we all know ultimately it's on ownership anyway, and we would love to have a bigger budget, but that could be the case. I'm really surprised by some of the front office decisions that have been made about like not going after big free agents, not like our biggest acquisition being Ty France, who's worked out, but a guy who's designated for assignment. We never really go for it. We kind of stick in the middle, where I'd rather either tank and get picks or get prospects, or go for it one time. And it just seems very weird. But I would say that this roster is solid. There was definitely some holes at the end of the bench when we had Nick Martini and Bubba Thompson on the roster at the start of the year. So I will not. I'd say Nick Rawls give him about a C as a front office guy, and I will give him David Bell like a C minus D as a manager, and that's just not good enough overall. And I'm also wondering, Rob, the last thing I'll wonder, and maybe you know more than I do, but I think we had a really good thing going with our analytics and pitching, and then we got rid of that. What's the name of the analytics pitching thing we got rid of a couple of years? The Streamline or whatever it's called. Um, I forget. We got rid of it 2, 3 years ago. It's the thing that really helped our pitchers, and we decided to nix that. And I don't think there's an advantage we have right now over any other teams. Like the Rays, they do a really good prospect scouting, they do analytics, and that's how they equalize the playing field with some of the big spenders. We don't spend or we don't do that as much anymore. Uh, Especially getting rid of that pitching thing. Again, I'll think of the thing and
I
come
think it
up
was
with it next week. But I
Driveline.
can't think of it. But
Was it Driveline?
Driveline, that's what it
Okay,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, Driveline. I think it was what it was. But they got rid of that 2, 3 years ago, and like that was like a competitive advantage. We don't have that anymore. So I don't know if that's Nick Kroll's call to get rid of them. I don't know if it's the front office or excuse me, the owner's not giving him money. I don't know. That's the tough part about it. But if he does fire David Bell, Rob, you're right. It is his last chance. He has that 1 year after David Bell is gone to get things right or to show vast improvement.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was like the Reds were trying to come into a new era of baseball, right? And Kyle Bodie was the guy who was leading it, and he's actually an Ohio guy, which I did not realize. I always thought he was a West Coast guy, but from Parma, Ohio, and he is the data driveline kind of guy here, and I think that they were maybe worried because like driveline is great, but it does sometimes lead to arm troubles. And I think maybe they were worried about that potentially being an issue just because, again, they try so much for spin rate and for speed enhancements and everything like that. And there's a lot of, I think that that's all MLB right now. And I think that we will be dealing with that, with the repercussions of these kinds of things over the next 10 to 20 years, to be honest with you. Because a lot of these young guys, that's all they know is driveline, right? It's not a bad thing, to be clear, but I would like to see the Reds try to just find an identity of some kind when it comes to how they're going to develop players, what they're going to manage. Like, it's fine to take after the Astros, the Braves, the Rays, right? They do things correctly, and they are able to contend pretty much every year. I mean, the Rays basically are in it 4 out of every 5 years. And that 1 year, they're just god awful, but they got a ton of really good young prospects, and they find a way to make it happen, right? And I want to see the Reds. I think that they dip their toes into too many different things that they try to do. And I think this front office can be to blame a little bit. But at the same time, it's like, I like what Nick Kroll has done. I do think I would give him more credit. I think most of his trades have actually been pretty solid considering the returns that they got on guys who were expiring or stuff like that, right? I mean, like, look at Tyler Mahle. Tyler Mahle hasn't even basically pitched since the Reds traded him. He's been on the injured list. Now, you can't obviously predict that, but that one's worked out pretty well. Like, I think there's a lot of little trades. Even the Sonny Gray trade. Chase Petty's starting to make his way up through the minor leagues. He looked okay in his first AAA start. Like, I think the Reds have a lot of good young guys who I don't think are getting enough credit because they all had bad seasons, and I think that that's where I have a bigger problem. I don't know if that's driveline. I don't know if that's analytics, but I think if I'm the Reds, truly, I don't know that you necessarily need to make a change in the front office, but I think the front office needs to make a change in their philosophy on everything from top to bottom. And I think that they need to establish what they want to do because the way the hitting went this year, the way the pitching has gone outside of a couple pitchers up here at the top, I think Derek Johnson's okay, but he needs to spread his philosophy to every level down the system of the Reds, right? If that's the way that we want to do things. The hitting coaches, like our hitting for the most part, I think at every level has been pretty bad. I think we've been mostly up in terms of pitchers. And I think that that's okay, but even still, some of the pitchers have not done what they needed to. Connor Phillips looked fine in a start or two ago, which was nice to see him potentially finding his way back after one of the most atrocious seasons I've ever seen in my entire life. Um, and I just think that if the front office is not going to make a change with Crawl or whoever else is running, I forget who the guy right under Crawl is right now, but if they're not going to do that, then I want to see them make a fundamental change throughout the organization. And that's the kind of change that I want to see. I agree with that on at the athletic trainer portion as well. I mean, you just cannot have this many guys breaking down at the end of the season. Andrew Abbott and Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo have enough innings under their belt to where they should be able to make it through an entire Major League Baseball season. If not, then there's a conditioning problem, there's a stretching problem, there's some sort of problem that is not getting these guys ready for the season. And you have things like, we thought Encarnacion Strand was only going to be out for a couple weeks. Ends up being out for the entire year because they missed something. Same thing with Matt McClain. You don't know that he tore his labrum right away. Well, why not? Or is it just that the lip service is completely dishonest and we can't trust them and they knew it all along and they just tried to lie to us almost, directly. So those are the kinds of changes that I want to see at the front office level, Joe. And if they can make those, I think this team for now and the long term will look a lot better.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways you can look at it, right? You could say Crawl has not done a good job, right? That could be option one. And that's, your evidence could be that we just didn't make the playoffs, haven't made the playoffs in the last couple of years. That's fine. Option two could be Crawl is doing the best given the resources he's given from the ownership. And that's fine too. Like, we don't know how many the resources he's given by the ownership. So it's kind of, again, it's nebulous to kind of try to place blame. You could also be in the camp of the next one of he identifies good players and there's a talent on this roster, but the manager and coaching staff don't get the most out of them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, I don't think there's a clear answer on what that is. I think there's definitely, we know the ownership's not giving him a lot of money, but if they did, would he do a good job? I don't know if his resume really speaks to that he would. And that's where I think wholesale changes could be needing to come here. Like, it's okay if you keep Nick Kroll. I still would like to get rid of David Bell and try something new if they go spend money in free agency. But it just, like, if I would love to fix everything and have a full reset, if that makes sense. I would love to have David Bell gone. I'd love to have Nick Kroll gone. Have someone who's built championship winning rosters or been a part of that. Whether it is, the Braves or the Astros, like we said, some of the good teams that have had those young cores that have gone out and added to it. We can't do anything about ownership, but like, if you want my ideal situation, it would probably be that, just to have everything set a new level and try to figure out where things went wrong, because it probably is a little bit of everything. When it's all said and done, Nick Kroll hasn't done the greatest job. The coaching staff hasn't obviously developed the players the most, or the minor league coaches as well, too. I guess we could look into that. But that ultimately falls on Kroll to go get better coaches, too.
Yep.
And then the ownership as well not helping out. So I would love a full reset in terms of the front office and coaching staff and say, hey, we have young guys. Let's go find someone who can make the most out of this young talent we have and go win a championship. Do I think that's going to happen? No. So I think it's going to be fire David Bell first. He's the scapegoat first. And then if that doesn't work after, again, a year, Nick Kroll's in the chopping block after that. He gets like 1 year. If he fires David Bell this offseason and the Reds don't make the playoffs next year, he's gone next. He's the next guy.
Or we can just hope and pray that the Castellinis sell the team. That would be cool. That'd be nice. That'd be real nice, because new ownership would come in and scrap everything. That's where you get your real wish, Joe. But I don't think that's.
You gotta hope they like. You gotta hope they like the players, the young players that they have. If you do that, but yes, I'm with you. I think they. I think that would. Don't hold your breath for that to happen. Let's just put it that way.
No, I think the Castellinis are here to stay. Maybe until the end of time, it feels like. But we'll move on. Last home series, homestand for the Reds. You got 6 more games here. 3 against the Braves, 3 against the Pirates. Then we'll have a quick 2-game series against the Guardians and 3 against the Cubs. And that'll wrap us up for the 2024 season. Let's head into the Braves, Joe. Like I said, I will be there on Wednesday night for Bark in the Park. Very excited about that. It's a 3-game series. This Braves team has been mightily struggling, Joe. They have not been the team that we thought that they would be. They have had the injury bug about as much as the Reds have, if not more. It just kind of, I guess, depends on the way you want to look at it. They are still hanging on to a wild card spot, but they are holding off their division rival the New York Mets at the moment. Um, the Reds can play spoiler here in a very big way. If the Reds found a way to sweep this Braves team, they would be very much in trouble to make the playoffs. To be honest with you, because I just think that this Mets team is starting to kind of figure it out a little bit right now and at the perfect time. That being said, Joe, I really don't know how well this Braves team is doing. I don't know. Let me check here real quick. I guess are we getting Chris Sale? that's the big question right now. It's TBD. It looks like for all three games here for the Braves. So I think if you can dodge Chris Sale, I think you got a chance. They got Williamson starting game one, Jacob Junis, and Julian Aguilar. So I think the Reds will have a chance potentially in two of these three games. I'm still going to pick a 1 and 2 though, Joe. I just think this Braves team is just a little bit better than the Reds right now. You may scream at me and be like, no, they're substantially better. Like, no, I think these injuries have really hurt this team. There's a reason why they started out pretty hot. They had a nice May and June. Things have definitely fallen off for this team with the amount of injuries that have just added up over time. And at this point, I don't think they're substantially better than the Reds, but I think I'm gonna call 1-2, and I think I'm gonna win my first game of the season, Joe. I'm 0 for 3 in Reds games. I'm 0 for 1 in Bengals games. I'm gonna get that one win on Wednesday. I'm gonna be there and watch them finally win a game this year. I'm gonna call 1 and 2 and hope that that's the case.
Good luck to you, buddy. Yeah, you're right. The Braves had a historic start to the season when they had all their talent available. They have fought on some really hard times. It was like almost not a question they would make the playoffs, but when all their guys got hurt, it kind of came back down to earth. My friend who's a Braves fan says that they're the worst team in baseball history. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but that's just how he feels watching the games because that's how much they've fallen on their face. And he has compared them to the Reds and said they're worse than the Reds, and I had to laugh in his face because we are Reds fans and we know how painful that is. But
Yep.
probably, you're right, not all that much better than the Reds right now as currently constructed. They have a lot more to play for, though. They are tied with the Mets, as you said, Rob. They play the Mets one more time this year. So, again, probably physically impossible for the Reds to make the playoffs because, one team's going to win two games, and that puts them one win away from, at best, the Reds can tie them. So
Yeah.
that's going to be fun to watch for Reds fans if something does happen here down the stretch. But, the Braves, again, very good team, a lot of talent. I think you're going to lose your game. I think they're going to win the first game of the series because the Braves are unsure who they're going to start on Tuesday. And it looks like Schwellenbach, who's had a pretty good year, 3.73 ERA, is on Wednesday. So I think that's tough against Jacob Junis. And then Chris Sale is on Thursday. So I'll go 1-2. I think they win the first one, lose the next two. Sorry for Rob. He might have to stop going to games altogether. We have to lock him in a cell with four padded walls because that's how it's going to go if he keeps on losing some of these games. Just one of those things. But yeah, they have a lot of talent. Our pitching is going to run out at some point, and our hitting is very hit or miss. So maybe they get that opening win of the series because we're good at doing that, and then after that we kind of go to 1-2.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to be right, but I was, trying to hold on to a little hopium. We'll move on. We got the Pirates after that. The Pirates, talk about a team that's fallen off other than against the Reds. They've been very good against the Reds, but they have basically gotten their clock knocked pretty much throughout the rest of the season. They keep having injury problems. Paul Skeens has been a lone bright spot for them in this back half. A lot of their other young pitching has not done as well in the later parts of this season. I'm going to go 2-1. I think the Reds are going to figure it out. I think they're gonna beat their demons. I think they're going to go 2-1 against the Pirates. They are at home. I expect it to be an interesting series. If nothing else, then we can at least feel good about somehow taking down a pretty bad Pirates team here at the very end. And if really nothing else, you can go to Friday to go see Nelly because Nelly will be at GABP after the game, I believe. So that could be something fun for you to go see.
Yeah, that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 2-1 in this series as well. Now, you're right. The Pirates have fallen off harder than we have. This is something we talked about. They always start off hot, then they always falter. And honestly, it's just because they don't have as much depth, right? Like that's what's going to happen. We do get Paul Skeens in the series, at least projected. We'll see if that actually holds up. I'm excited to watch that Rhett Lauder versus Paul Skeens,
That could be
one
fun.
versus two from last year's draft. Could be fun to see that. It's on Saturday, which is during college football day, but I'll find a way to have it on the screen and kind of keep tabs on that. Paul Skeens having a very good case to be the Cy Young. He's 10-2 with a 2.1 ERA. He didn't start the year up here. The current odds have him third behind Chris Sale and Zach Wheeler, who I know I mentioned on our talk about the Cy Young. So we get Chris Sale and Paul Skeens this week. How fun for us
Yay.
that we get them in the same week here. But no, he's been very good. Definitely a player to watch this series and overall. Again, 2-1. I think we can get the better of them. We are a better team than them overall. We may lose that Skeens Louder start, but I'm excited to watch those two guys duel. I think don't like it's very rare that we get big pitching matchups in baseball these days that like get people excited. This is one I think we could be like the start of maybe a rivalry, especially because they're division foes.
And what makes me feel even better is that Rhett Lauder may end up being our four starter next year, while Paul Skeens is their number one. So really, really puts things into perspective, I think, in that regard. But yeah, I mean, you know what? I think ultimately not a bad week. 3-3, and then maybe we can find a way to sweep the Cubs at the end of the year in Chicago. That'd be a really fun way. If this team, I will say, if this team could find and accidentally go 8-3 and finish 81-81 this year, I'm not going to be too upset because injuries aside, I think they could have found a way to win four more games without the injuries and would have been a playoff team in that, most likely in that regard. So if they can find a way to finish 8-3 over these last 11, I think that'd be great. Right now, we'd have them at 3-3, which would mean that they'd have to win their final 5 games against a very good Guardians team and against the Cubs team that is surging. They are technically still in the race. They can make a run. The Cubs are only 5 games back. Shouldn't say only anymore. They are 5 games back of the Mets and the Braves at this point, but we'll have to see if they can find their way to make a run. I would love to, even if nothing else, see the Reds find a way to finish second in the division. Just little feel-good things, Joe. So that's what I'll be watching for. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us here, Joe. You got any words of wisdom for the people as we sign off for one of the last times this season?
Yeah, September 16th is the anniversary of Tom Browning's perfect game back in 1988. That is a very awesome note. I hope we get to see one of those someday. That I got to see that no hitter from Blake Snell. I hope we get to see a perfect game at some point. Tom Browning, very nice guy. Met him at Reds Fest one time. He was very impressed that I remembered exactly how many wins he had in 1990. It is 15 wins he had in 1990. And
Nice.
just kind of an inside look about some of these players. They remember individual at bats, but a lot of them aren't caught up into the stats all the time. Like they kind of like he didn't know how many wins he had in 1990, but he could tell you about an at bat he had against the Pirates back in 1990. I don't know. He could do that stuff. So it was nice meeting him at Reds Fest all those years ago. I'm glad that he was impressed with like a 12-year-old Joe who knew how many wins he had because I watched the Wire to Wire documentary VHS tape about a million times when I was growing up. So props to him. Anniversary. Let's have some more perfect games in the future.
Prompts to you too for doing that. My last little thing here I will say is a quick happy birthday to John Sadak. I believe it's today or yesterday, I can't remember, but he continues to bring us a lot of joy, more so than that old Tom guy who we don't talk about too much. But very happy for John Sadak. So happy birthday to you. And yeah, guys, that'll do it for us. So with that, we'll catch you on the next one.